For nearly 200 years, Britain didn't just trade with India, they systematically drained $45 trillion from the subcontinent over 200 years. When the British arrived, India controlled 25% of global GDP. By the time they left, it was down to 3%. When we think of the British Empire, we're told it brought trade, civilization, and development to India. But that's not the real story. Britain didn't just trade with India, they looted it, systematically, ruthlessly. The East India Company forced Indian farmers to grow cash crops like indigo and opium instead of food. They turned fertile agricultural land into opium farms to drug China for British profit. Then the Great Bengal Famine of 1770. One of the earliest and deadliest, it killed around 10 million people, about a third of Bengal's population. The British East India Company continued to collect high taxes and export grain even as people starved. Then came the Second Bengal Famine of 1943. Occurring during World War II, this famine led to the deaths of over 3 million people. British wartime policies, hoarding, price inflation, and forced grain exports worsened the crisis. Winston Churchill's government diverted Indian food to British troops and stockpiles, refusing humanitarian aid. In total, between the late 18th and early 20th century, over 30 million Indians died in famines, many of which were avoidable. These tragedies were not natural disasters alone, but the direct consequence of colonial misrule and economic exploitation. British policies destroyed India's textile industry, once the world's largest, by imposing crushing tariffs on Indian goods while flooding Indian markets with cheap British products. They built railways not for Indians, but to extract resources faster. Every mile of track was paid for with Indian taxes and Indian labor, but designed to move wealth from India to Britain. The British imposed salt taxes that made basic survival expensive, land revenue systems that bankrupted farmers, and debt structures that trapped entire regions in poverty. They turned a prosperous civilization into a source of raw materials and a captive market for British goods. India was one of the wealthiest nations on earth, producing over 25% of the world's GDP. By the time the British left in 1947, India was one of the poorest. This isn't just history. It's the story of how the richest empire in the world was built on the systematic plunder of India, and how that plunder still echoes today.